We all love a good drink, but what about those legendary, world-famous alcoholics who took things to a whole new level? Get ready. We are going to show you the stories of the 10 worst alcoholic politicians in world history. Number 10. Joseph McCarthy. Once hailed as a national hero, Joseph McCarthy's swift descent into national disgrace was nothing short of astonishing. And as his reputation crumbled, so did his battle with alcoholism, ultimately contributing to his untimely demise. During the notorious McCarthy hearings, the man was reportedly consuming a staggering quart of liquor each day. But let's not rush to paint the picture of McCarthy living out his final days in a perpetual alcoholic stupor. According to his biographer, there were moments when McCarthy managed to climb back onto the wagon, albeit with a slight adjustment. Instead of whiskey, he would opt for beer. For days and even weeks, he would abstain from the hard stuff. And there was a reason for it. You see, Joseph McCarthy was no ordinary drinker. He had a peculiar relationship with alcohol. As his biographer explained, he would frequently go, quote, on the wagon for days and weeks at a time. This was for the best. Quote, he went to pieces on the second or third drink, and he did not snap back quickly. Number 9. William Pitt. William Pitt, a name that resonates through the annals of British history. This renowned politician and general made quite a name for himself during the Revolutionary War. But little did many know, he was also among the infamous ranks of alcoholic politicians in Parliament during his time. And boy, did he have a legacy moment of drunken revelry that has been passed down through the ages. Picture this. Pitt, fueled by the spirits of adventure and perhaps a few too many spirits of the liquid variety, managed to gulp down not one, not two, but 3 entire bottles of port wine. Impressive, right? Well, it was all fun and games until the poor man found himself in the middle of a parliamentary meeting. And what did he do? Oh, he promptly vomited right behind the speaker's chair. Now, I can't say I'm entirely surprised by his excessive indulgence in port. Back in those days, it was considered a masculine accomplishment, a display of prowess that would make fraternities today proud. Ah, the wonders of toxic masculinity, even in the pages of history. Number 8. George Washington. George Washington was the man who led America to victory and became the first president of the United States. But did you know that behind his stoic and commanding presence, there was a man with a refined taste for the finer things in life? Yes, my friends, George Washington was quite the wine aficionado. During his time as the commander of the Continental Army, Washington made sure that each of his troops received a daily disbursement. And you won't believe what was included in that package. A cup of rum. Talk about boosting morale, right? But it didn't stop there. Our beloved general also had a deep appreciation for French wine. When the Americans joined forces with the French against the British, Washington saw an opportunity to not only fight for independence, but also to indulge in his love for the grape. He would often engage in lively conversations about wine with his French envoys, comparing notes and savoring the exquisite flavors. Ah, c'est magnifique. Number 7. Benjamin Franklin. Ah, Benjamin Franklin, the man of many talents, and a true founding father of the United States. But did you know that behind his ingenious mind and witty charm, he had a little secret? Yes, my friends, Benjamin Franklin had a soft spot for the nectar of the gods, booze. In fact, he was quite the advocate for the benefits of alcoholic beverages. One of his most famous quotes goes something like this: "In wine, there is wisdom. In beer, there is freedom. In water, there is bacteria." Now, you might be scratching your head, wondering what on earth he meant by that. Well, back in those days, unboiled water was teeming with all sorts of nasty bacteria, just waiting to wreak havoc on unsuspecting drinkers. So, to avoid any unfortunate encounters, Franklin found solace in the comforting embrace of beer, wine, and apple cider. Before we continue our journey, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you won't miss out on any of the exciting content coming soon. Number 6. Richard Nixon. Richard Nixon, the man who held the highest office in the land, had a few secrets hidden behind that presidential facade. According to Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist Seymour Hersh, Nixon had a bit of a drinking problem during his time in the White House. And by bit of a drinking problem, I mean he was drunk throughout his presidency. Hersh revealed that Nixon would often indulge in some heavy drinking, especially at night. It got to the point where you couldn't even reach him at Camp David because he was off in his own boozy world. There's even a wild tale of Nixon getting a little too carried away at a restaurant in Miami and offering a random woman a job at the White House. Talk about drunken generosity. But perhaps the most alarming incident was during the 1970 crisis when North Korea shot down a U.S. plane. Nixon, reportedly quite drunk at the time, was supposedly ranting and raving in the midst of the crisis. Can you imagine the leader of the free world in that state during a critical moment? It's enough to make you worry. And it didn't stop there. Nixon's drinking habits had a way of seeping into other aspects of his presidency. There are stories of him drunkenly telling his trusted advisor, Henry Kissinger, that, quote, "We've got to nuke Vietnam." Yikes. It's no wonder his aides were concerned about what would happen if the Soviet Union decided to attack at night. Nixon's frequent incapacitation was a cause for serious worry. But Nixon's addiction didn't stop at alcohol alone. He was an all-around addict, relying on sleeping pills and mood stabilizers that made him even more unpredictable. Just a drink or two would send him spiraling into unmanageability, slurring his speech and acting out. And if you thought drunk dialing was reserved for college kids, think again. Nixon had a penchant for drunk dialing members of the White House staff. Can you imagine receiving a call from the president when he's under the influence? The things they must have heard. As we reach the halfway point of our journey, make sure you stick around till the end for some exciting surprises. Number 5. James Buchanan. Let me introduce James Buchanan, the 15th President of the United States, known for his less than stellar performance in office. But did you know that his love for alcohol may have played a role in his less than ideal presidency? Let's dive into the boozy world of James Buchanan. Buchanan's fondness for the bottle can be traced back to his college days at Dickinson College. It seems that in those days, being a, quote, sober, plodding, industrious youth was just not cool. No, the students of Dickinson embraced a robust drinking culture, and young Buchanan was right in the thick of it. But it didn't stop there. Once Buchanan made his way to Washington, his reputation as a hard drinker followed him. There's a legendary tale of him hosting a soiree at a saloon, where he and his guests managed to plow through a staggering 450 bottles of wine and champagne. Talk about a party. And when it came to his personal drinking habits, Buchanan didn't hold back. He reportedly guzzled down a whopping 10 gallons of whiskey every single week. Yes, you heard that right, 10 gallons. One journalist who attempted to keep up with Buchanan's drinking prowess found himself astounded, exclaiming that the amount of Madeira and sherry consumed by Buchanan would fill more than one old cellar. That's quite the feat. Now, you might be wondering if Buchanan's heavy drinking had any impact on his ability to govern the country. Well, many historians believe that it did. Buchanan's presidency is often criticized for his failure to prevent the Civil War, and his love for alcohol may have played a role in that. It's possible that his impaired judgment and decision-making affected his ability to effectively lead the nation during such a critical time. The consequences of his alcohol consumption may have had far-reaching effects on the United States itself. In the end, James Buchanan's love for alcohol became intertwined with his legacy as one of the worst presidents in American history. Number 4. Boris Yeltsin. Boris Yeltsin was the first president of Russia and a legendary figure when it comes to world leaders and their drinking escapades. Yeltsin was not one to shy away from showing just how intoxicated he could be, even in a time when such behavior wasn't exactly expected from a president. But hey, maybe his reputation as the lovable drunk uncle helped break the tension between East and West after the Cold War. In his younger days, Yeltsin was actually vehemently anti-alcohol. But as he climbed the political ladder and his star began to rise in the 1960s and 1970s, something changed. Maybe it was the stress of his role or the political culture in the Soviet Union and Russia, but Yeltsin's relationship with alcohol took a turn. It's said that Yeltsin drank throughout the day, and his alcohol consumption became a well-known aspect of his personal persona. In fact, former American President Bill Clinton and his administration made a point of scheduling meetings with Yeltsin early in the day, when he was less likely to be under the influence. Talk about strategic planning. Yeltsin's drinking habits didn't just stay within the confines of the Kremlin. They caused quite a stir on the global stage as well. One memorable incident took place during a state visit to America. Yeltsin, in a rather inebriated state, found himself roaming the streets of Washington, D.C., wearing nothing but his underwear. His mission? To satisfy his craving for pizza. I guess we can all relate to that late-night pizza quest, right? And let's not forget the time when Yeltsin decided to conduct a military orchestra in Berlin. In a moment of drunken enthusiasm, he snatched the baton out of the conductor's hand and began conducting the musicians himself. Yeltsin later wrote that, quote, "The weight would lift after a few shot glasses," and, quote, "In that sense of lightness, I felt as if I could conduct an orchestra." Despite his fondness for alcohol, Yeltsin actually implemented a tax increase on vodka, Russia's national drink. Talk about ironic, right? But hey, maybe he wanted to balance out his own indulgences with some financial responsibility. The stories of Yeltsin's boozy adventures go on and on. There was that champagne-fueled rant in Stockholm in 1997, where he sometimes managed to relate Swedish meatballs to the face of tennis star Bjorn Borg. Now, we're not quite sure how he made that connection, but hey, Boris had his own unique way of seeing the world. And here we are, entering the realm of the top 3 most notorious alcoholic politicians. Brace yourselves. Number 3. Ulysses S. Grant. President Ulysses S. Grant, the 18th President of the United States, was known for many things, but his affinity for alcohol certainly stood out. In fact, some might argue that he was the biggest drunkard to ever grace the halls of the White House. Quite the unique claim to fame, wouldn't you say? Grant's journey with heavy drinking started early on. As a young man, he couldn't resist the allure of his father's medicinal blackberry cordial, sneaking sips when no one was looking. But it was during his service in the Mexican-American War in 1848 that his drinking habits truly took hold. From that point on, whiskey became a constant companion in his life. Now, it's important to note that Grant's drinking didn't hinder his rise to prominence. In fact, he gained recognition as one of the best Union generals during the American Civil War. Fearless and respected on the battlefield, Grant's military prowess was undeniable. So much so that when the war ended, it was only natural for him to ascend to the highest position in the land, the presidency. But here's the thing. Grant's love for alcohol often overshadowed his political work. If he didn't have a glass of whiskey in hand, he just wasn't a happy camper. Many historians would argue that he was a far better general than a president. But one thing everyone agrees on is that he was a damn good drinker. The extent of Grant's drinking has been a subject of debate, both during his lifetime and after his passing. Some claim that he struggled with heavy drinking, while others argue that it may have been blown out of proportion. Nevertheless, it's clear that alcohol played a significant role in his life. Despite numerous attempts to quit, Grant always found himself returning to the bottle. It seems that he indulged more heavily when he was away from his wife, Julia, who was known to help moderate his drinking. Grant's drinking didn't come without consequences. He faced a setback in his military career when he was asked to resign from the Army in 1854 after appearing drunk at a function. Although it's difficult to gauge how much his drinking impacted his command of Union forces during the Civil War, it did raise concerns among officials in Washington. Looking back, it's hard to deny that Ulysses S. Grant was a high-functioning alcoholic. Some argue that his alcoholism actually made him the military leader that President Lincoln needed during the Civil War. Grant's ability to brush aside caution and take bold actions may have been fueled by his, quote, escape hatch from his troubles. It's as if he had nothing to lose and everything to gain. But let's not paint Grant as wildly irresponsible. One historian aptly describes his benders as, quote, a release, but a controlled one, like the ignition of a gas flare above a high-pressure oil well. Grant may have found solace and release in alcohol, but he still managed to maintain a level of control. Number 2. Queen Elizabeth. Queen Elizabeth, or Elizabeth Bowes-Lyon, known as the Queen Mother, certainly knew how to enjoy a drink. Growing up in the booze-soaked British aristocracy of the early 20th century, she was no stranger to the pleasures of alcohol. In fact, it became a regular part of her daily routine from a young age, and she continued to enjoy her favorite tipples throughout her long and remarkable life, which came to an end in 2002 at the age of 101. A glimpse into the Queen Mother's drinking habits can be found in a diary entry from 1923, where she noted that she would often indulge in a glass of sherry at 4:30 a.m. after returning home from all-night parties. It seems she had quite the stamina for late-night revelry, but her drinking didn't stop there. She had a strict drinking schedule that she adhered to religiously. In the morning, she would start with a gin and Dubonnet, a delightful blend of flavors that became her signature drink. At lunchtime, she would enjoy red wine and port, and with dinner, she would savor 2 glasses of Veuve Clicquot, pink champagne. Now that's what you call a well-rounded drinking repertoire. The Queen Mother's ability to hold her alcohol was quite impressive, befitting her status as an old-school royal. While public incidents of drunkenness were not part of her reputation, it's possible that alcohol may have helped loosen her famously sharp tongue on occasion. After all, a little liquid courage can sometimes lead to candid remarks. She was known to carry a bottle of Dubonnet with her on outings, ensuring she always had her preferred drink within reach. With her fondness for gin and Dubonnet, along with her penchant for champagne and other fine spirits, the Queen Mother established her own legacy in the world of drinks. In fact, her favorite combination of gin and Dubonnet is now known as the Queen Mother cocktail, forever immortalizing her drink of choice. It's worth noting that her drinking habits were quite extraordinary, even by today's standards. Her weekly alcohol intake would put many to shame, with a grand total of 70 units of alcohol per week. To put that into perspective, that's far beyond the current recommended limit of 14 units per week for women in the United Kingdom. God save the Queen. Number 1. Winston Churchill. Winston Churchill, the iconic British statesman, had a reputation for his love of alcohol that is as famous as his leadership during World War II. From an early age, it seems he cultivated a taste for the drink, with his drinking habits taking hold during his time as a young officer in India and South Africa, starting at the age of 22 in 1895. Churchill's relationship with alcohol was complex. While he enjoyed a stiff drink regularly, it's worth noting that his love of alcohol may have been somewhat exaggerated. He consumed alcohol throughout the day, from a glass of wine at breakfast to enjoying champagne with guests late into the night. However, he was known to despise drunkenness and once remarked, quote, "I have taken more out of alcohol than alcohol has taken out of me." It seems he appreciated the pleasures and nuances of a good drink without succumbing to excess. Alcohol played a significant role in Churchill's diplomacy. He relished entertaining fellow world leaders such as Franklin D. Roosevelt and Joseph Stalin, often bonding with them over drinks that would extend into the early morning hours. These informal gatherings allowed for relaxed and candid conversations, fostering personal connections and shaping political alliances. However, Churchill's drinking habits became a liability when Hitler's Germany propagated propaganda painting him as a drunkard. Churchill's signature drink varied, as he enjoyed a range of spirits, including champagne and gin. However, whiskey was his staple, and he was particularly fond of a Johnny Walker-based cocktail that became associated with him. While it's true that Churchill had an affinity for alcohol, it is important to note that he was likely alcohol-dependent rather than alcoholic. The Churchill Center, dedicated to educating future generations about his leadership, emphasizes this distinction. According to accounts, Churchill's drinking habits were part of his lifestyle, but he maintained a formidable capacity for booze, rarely, if ever, appearing publicly drunk. In fact, Churchill seemed to embrace the image of a man who could handle his drink. He famously ensured he always had a drink in hand when someone wanted to capture his photograph, recognizing that people admired those that could hold their weight in the world of drinking. Churchill's heavy drinking didn't hinder his remarkable accomplishments. At the time of his election as Prime Minister, he was initially unpopular. However, through his leadership, determination, and wit, he became one of the most beloved politicians in history. His ability to navigate late-night benders with American allies and White House staffers, referred to as the Winston hours, solidified the close alliance between Britain and the United States. He fought Hitler, taught a parrot to say, "Fuck the Nazis," and also was hilariously quick-witted. It's clear that his consumption of alcohol, while significant, didn't diminish his extraordinary contributions to history. And that wraps up our tipsy journey through the lives of some notorious alcoholic politicians. If you want more intriguing history, hit that subscribe button and join our wild adventures. See you in the next video.